Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. One of the topics that comes up time and again for our clients is imposter syndrome and struggles with self-doubt and lack of confidence in a huge range of forms. And it's been a while since we did an episode related to this topic. So we are joined today by Aoife O'Brien, who is a friend of mine who also has her own podcast and who has done lots of research and speaks quite widely on this topic. So we cannot wait to dig in and mine her brain for all of the value that she is going to share. So Aoife, a huge welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for the warm welcome. I'm so excited to have this conversation. It's something I absolutely love talking about. I know I had you previously on my podcast, and I'm so excited to see what's going to come out today.
Yeah, I feel like this is a topic that we could talk about for hours. So it's going to be the challenge.
We'll try and keep it.
Exactly that. So Aoife, introduce yourself for our listeners, give them a bit of a flavour of why this topic is one that you're so passionate about and also what you do and what your story is that's brought you to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked, I suppose my career is 25 years long, which is scary to say, but I worked for about 20 years in the market research, consumer market research, essentially, always on the agency side in fast moving consumer goods. And it was something I loved to do. And I had a couple of experiences at work that made me think, oh, there has to be more to life than this, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. And I decided to leave my corporate role around 6 years ago. And I went on and I did a coaching diploma and I did a master's in organizational behavior. And the masters really brought together the people side and the data nerdiness as well. And I absolutely loved it. It really opened my eyes to all of these things that I think were not being translated into work. So I learned so much. And those learnings, I never experienced them firsthand when I was a manager or when I was an employee. And quite early on in my business, someone asked me, or they put out a general call actually to share experiences of imposter syndrome. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, imposter syndrome. I definitely had that. So I was thinking back of all of the times that I had experienced, maybe whether I didn't know it, I was reflecting back. So I was like, okay, so there was a few times that I experienced imposter syndrome. Specifically, I was promoted to the leadership team and I was looking around going, oh, well, they had no other option. They had no choice other than me. I just got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. There was another time where I asked for way more money than I thought I deserved. And I was always watching my back thinking they're going to find out that was a clerical error. They've made a huge mistake. And then the other time that really stands out to me is when I started my business and I'm surrounded by all of these other amazing business women thinking, why me? And they've got everything together. They have it all figured out. They have it sorted. And being asked to share that experience, and I shared quite openly. And then about 3 months later, I appeared with my image along with 3 other women sharing my story in the Irish Times, which is, if you're listening in the UK, the equivalent of being in the Times. And talk about feeling like an imposter. I was so totally in over my head. I did not know, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. So that's how I got into it in the first place. And yeah, that's how it began. And then people started asking me more and more, will you talk about imposter syndrome? Will you share your experiences? Will you tell us how to overcome? That's the big thing. Everyone wants to know, how do I overcome imposter syndrome? So I started speaking about it more and more on stages with my research and nerdy background, I decided I wanted to do my own research into it. So I carried out some research during the pandemic, actually. And I would love to continue with that research and do a little bit more and uncover more of the kind of the connections that people have. But for me, the research really brought to light the behaviors that people associate with imposter syndrome, or that they feel, or what's going on for them, and just how rampant it is and how disheartening it is to read that these capable people are experiencing these things. So that's a long-winded way to say how I got into talking about imposter syndrome. And I suppose for me, it ties in with the broader context of what I do in terms. So my business is called Happier at Work. And I suppose it's one of the facets is being happier at work. You need to feel confident in your job. So it's only a small part of a bigger picture, but it tends to be one that I get asked about a lot, and one that I'm really interested in sharing about and uncovering more all the time.
Wow, that, you know, as you were talking there's so many things that I can resonate with, and I'm sure our listeners feel the same. So I think before we get into all of the good stuff about how we can overcome it and everything, how would you actually define it? Like, what would you say if you think that you're struggling with imposter syndrome? What would it look like?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people confuse self-doubt with imposter syndrome. And I think absolutely everyone doubts their abilities from time to time. We all have this sense that, oh, maybe I can't do this, or this is a bit of a stretch for me. I think with imposter syndrome, it's that added piece of, and I'm going to get found out. And just this underlying fear that other people are going to realize that you're not enough, that you don't deserve it, that you don't know what you're talking about. And there's all of these things combining to make you just totally afraid of what's going on, and afraid of being found out for the fraud that you believe that you are. So you think you've somehow pulled the wool over other people's eyes, that they think you're better than you actually are, without giving them credit for what they believe or what they've seen in terms of your skills and things like that. So really it's about that. It's not just self-doubt. It's the underlying fear that I'm going to get exposed for the fraud that I believe I am.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that. You feel like you're going to be exposed, because to a certain degree, when you're going through your career, when you're going through your life, the different experiences that you have and all of the things that you do, obviously when you get into those interviews and you get those jobs and things like that, you've got there for a reason. Like, you can't really lie that much. You can't really show that you've got the depth that you're of experience that you're saying that you've got. So it's a funny thing, isn't it? Where you let that belief take over and you almost discredit all of the experience that you've got and what it's taken to get you to where you are now.
This is it. And I think we have a tendency to do this for ourselves, I think. All of that experience doesn't matter, or you forget about it. I know certainly for me, I'm always forward looking, and I'm looking at how much more I have to go or how much more I have to achieve, rather than being really grateful and looking backwards and saying, this is how far I've come. And I've been reading a few really interesting books recently, not specifically about imposter syndrome, but really highlighting the fact that we need to always acknowledge how far we have come from where we began, because I think there's a high proportion of the population that is going to be looking at how much more do I have to go? And I am definitely one of those people. Like, where is the gap between where I am now and where I need to be? And judging myself on that, rather than acknowledging the fact that I have come such a long way in my career already.
There's a book that I read, and I'm wondering whether this is one of the ones that you're referring to, but The Gap and the Gain.
Oh, I haven't, but that's going to be added to my very long to be read pile.
So that's exactly that point. And I remember reading that, and I've shared it with a couple of clients and fellow business owners, because you're so right about that tendency to focus. And that's the gap then in the title is talking about where we are and looking to where we want to be. And the gain is about focusing on exactly that point of where we've come from and how much experience, knowledge, understanding, skill we have gained in relation to where we were. And I think you're so right on, it's so easy to get caught up in, especially when you're ambitious, when you're talented, and when things come quite easily to you in your early career. I think we can easily create that habit of focusing on what next, where do I want to get next, what's this in service of, rather than where have I come from and what have I gained. So we've talked a bit about that definition. Tell us where you see this show up for clients, because I feel like there's some very specific times that people are more prone to experiencing it. And we both see it a lot with our clients. And I'm wondering whether that ties in with your research of where does it show up and when does it show up in people's careers?
Yeah, so really it's about when it shows up is any time that there is change. So really strongly for a job change, a promotion, a company change. So they're the huge times when it can be a trigger. And as you can imagine, I think we expect that, and oftentimes we'll see in job ads that they'll say we want someone to hit the ground running. So we don't give ourselves credit for, there is this ramp up time that we have when we start a new job. We need to learn the systems. We need to know who the people are, how things get done in that organization. And I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to really make sure that we're doing the best job. And it really triggers this, oh, I'm the wrong person. Why did they choose me? They must have had no other options, or they had a series of terrible candidates and I was the best of a bad bunch. We tell ourselves all of these kinds of things when something like that happens. Case in point, when I was promoted to that senior leadership position, I was like, they didn't have an option, or I was the best of a bad bunch, or I was telling myself all of these things. And I suppose beyond just the triggers, it's the behaviors that are associated with imposter syndrome as well. And again, I'm sure both of you will be able to relate to this as well as listeners, but there are some extremes. So on the one hand, I probably was this person who I just didn't open my mouth. I don't feel like I have anything to add. If I open my mouth, people are going to think that I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I'm going to expose myself as a fraud rather than someone else exposing me as a fraud. So there's that extreme, staying quiet, not speaking up, not sharing your ideas because you think you can't add any value. But then there's the other extreme where you are working so hard, basically to cover up these imposter feelings, that you're just working yourself to the bone. You're getting really stressed out about things all the time. Sometimes you might even be covering up the fact that you're working late. Sometimes people work late and they boast about it, but then sometimes you might work really late, but then put on, and I know this is the right thing to do, but they're really trying to hide the fact that they have been working late, but putting on something like a delay send or something like that. So there's extremes around the behaviors. One is staying quiet, and then the other is more about overworking and really getting stuck into it.
Makes perfect sense, given that I specialize in coaching people in their first 90 days in a new role, as to why this shows up for so many of my clients. And if I look back to when I was promoted, I describe it sometimes to people as almost a bit of an identity gap, where I didn't imagine. So my first senior leadership role, the organization had advertised that role externally a couple of times in the Sunday Times when that had an appointment section on a Sunday.
Wow. Yeah.
I was
talking about feeling like an imposter.
I was in my 20s and I just didn't see myself as the kind of person to be ready for or have the kind of job that was advertised in the Sunday Times appointment section. That felt serious. It felt further on. It felt very different. And internally, funnily enough, for my own experience, internally, I felt fine, because internally within the organization, I felt like, yeah, that's okay. I can see why I've been given this opportunity. Where I found it really difficult was in situations where I was with external stakeholders. So when I was going to events, or when I was going to meetings. I remember a meeting that we had with a warehouse supplier because we were looking at expanding. And I remember sitting there and it was like an out-of-body experience where I was like, I don't know how to hold this kind of meeting. I don't know how to negotiate terms on a warehouse. What am I doing here? So yeah, very much relate to that. And that was how I termed it for myself, as an identity gap, where it took time for me to catch up with the role that I now had and to see myself in that light.
Yeah. And I suppose I'm thinking about that, thinking you probably didn't know because you'd never done it before. But did anyone train you how to do it? Or did you cut yourself some slack because I've never done this before, so this is my first time. Let's see how it goes. Let's try it out. And if it's a disaster, what can I learn from this as well? So I think it's really tough being put in that situation. But I think we do get so wrapped up in the how we feel in that moment that sometimes we forget. And I think this is oftentimes the case, that when we have imposter syndrome, we're convinced that, yeah, I know there is a thing called imposter syndrome, but actually you don't get it. I really am an imposter, and I really am in over my head, out of my depth, and I'm going to get found out.
Yeah, it's funny because as Jackie was talking to me then, and based on what you were saying, I was just thinking back to like early in my own career, and I used to go to the senior leadership meetings and everyone had to introduce themselves, people from different sites. And I always felt that I struggled with saying my job title because I genuinely felt like I was an imposter. And if I shouted about it, this is who I am, this is what I do, that at some point someone's going to go, how are you even there? Why? You're not meant to be there. You haven't got enough experience. But it was almost like an internal battle that I had going on at that time, because it was like, I know I've done enough to get here, but I just didn't have that belief at that point in time that I could do it. And I was always thinking, they're going to find me out soon. When am I going to get found out? And it's such a hard cycle to be in, because if you've not got the right support from your line manager or the leadership team and things like that, or even if there's no real support within the business and you're not really sure where to go for that support, it can feel quite difficult. And then you don't want to share those feelings with family and friends. I know I didn't, because I was like, they think I'm amazing because I'm in this senior leadership position, and I'm like dying inside thinking, oh, they're going to find me out any minute should I be in this position. And I couldn't share that with them because they were so proud of me. And like my mum was just like, oh, my daughter's a senior manager now and all of this. And I was like, can you stop telling people that? Because I'm just not feeling it. But yeah, I'm there. I'm getting paid for it, but I'm not feeling it. And I suppose that's the hard bit, isn't it? And knowing how to deal with that and get the support without letting it take over and almost hold you back in a way.
Yeah, this is it. I think you've raised a couple of really good points there, Pam. The first one is about managers and what managers can do. And this is something I'm increasingly being asked about. And it's not just about the individual, it's about the environment that we create for them, and not forgetting. And I've done this when I was a manager as well. You forget to give people feedback that they're doing a really good job. So I had two people in particular in and around the same time, both come to me and say, I just want to check in and see how I'm doing. Am I doing an okay job? And from my perspective, they were doing an excellent job. But I think we forget to tell people. We assume that if someone's doing a really good job, that they know that they're doing a really good job. And I think as managers, we have this responsibility to share, yes, you're doing a really good job. Here's why we brought you in for the role, as a reminder, as a refresher, to say, to reinforce that idea that this is why we chose you. We chose you for this skill, that skill. This is what you bring to the role. This is your unique capability. And I think we need to reinforce that, to create that environment where people feel like it's okay. And also that they feel it's okay to speak up and say, do you know what, I'm actually feeling a bit of imposter syndrome at the moment. And you don't even have to explicitly say that. You can just say, I'd love to get some reassuring feedback or some positive feedback on how I'm performing in the role. But also as a manager, sharing your own experiences. Oh, when I first took that senior leadership role, or when I first got into this company, this is how I felt. So then it becomes okay for other people to share their experiences as well. And the other aspect around, I don't want to dispel this myth that my family and friends think that I'm absolutely amazing. And so if I admit to feeling like an imposter, then they're going to think that I'm an imposter, that I've somehow pulled the wool over everyone's eyes, and dispel the myth. And I suppose this is what we think, that we're so afraid to speak about it in case other people realize that we really are the imposter that we think we are. Like, I don't think if you shared that experience, I think it would make you look vulnerable. I think it would make you look strong because you're sharing what's going on for you, rather than I'm sharing this and now they're going to think that I'm a total fraud and I don't deserve this role. So I think we convince ourselves of all of these things. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do, because that's what imposter syndrome tells us.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it, where you talk about vulnerability, because that in order to grow as a leader, you do need to bring in that element of vulnerability and share how you're feeling and how you felt and things like that. But it can feel quite dangerous, especially if you feel like you're teetering on the edge of being found out.
Totally, yeah. And I think therein lies the problem. You're like, who can I tell? Who is it safe to tell? And so the more we talk about these things, and companies bring me in often to talk about these things, just to get them out in the open. And one of the things that I share is about just sharing stories with each other of, oh, this is when I felt like an imposter, or this is what I'm going through right now, and kind of get some feedback. Because the trouble is, like I said, we assume that we are going to expose ourselves by talking about it, but actually usually the opposite is true, that we are reassured, like, this is where I see it, this is what I see from the outside looking in. And the other thing that I didn't mention at the start is we can't tell from the outside when someone is feeling imposter syndrome. We might notice in their behaviors if they're not speaking up, if they're working crazy long hours, if they are micromanaging their team, maybe that's a sign of imposter syndrome. There's loads of things that could be a sign, but oftentimes from the outside, it's really hard to tell what's really going on for someone in their head. And from the research, I looked at gender as well. And the really interesting thing that came through from the research that I carried out was that imposter syndrome hits men most severely when they first become managers. So that's the time that it's the worst for men. And it seems that over time it diminishes. So as they progress into more senior positions, they feel it less and less. But the opposite is true for women. So I think that's such an interesting difference between the two genders. So a woman will feel imposter syndrome, but then it seems to be exacerbated as she progresses through an organization. And I think linking back to Jackie's point from earlier, it's probably that identity gap. It's that gap between where she believes she is now versus where she believes she should be, and trying to close that gap. So the more you progress in an organization as a woman, and again, this is from my research, it's like 200 and something people. So it's not insignificant, but this is what happens for women, that as we progress, it tends to be triggered more and more.
Yeah. And do you know what? It's interesting that you say that, because I totally get that from the clients that I've worked with. That absolutely makes sense. And even if it was a pool of 20 people as opposed to 200 people, I bet you would still get the same result coming through, because it seems to be quite a common trait. But I'm going to absolutely follow all of your research now, because I know you're going to do some more, and
I definitely will do some more. But I think it is interesting, and why don't we let people in on a little secret that you're looking around thinking I'm the only one who has imposter syndrome, but actually in my research 90% of people had experienced imposter syndrome at some point. And that was split 50-50. So 45% currently experiencing it, or 45% had experienced it in the past. So when you're looking around and you think other people don't feel this way, I really am an imposter, the likelihood is that most of the people around you are feeling exactly the same way.
It's really interesting that you say that, because as you were talking just a few moments ago, what occurred to me is I noticed quite recently somebody that I gave some positive feedback to. Now, they present really confidently externally, and their response to me indicated that they'd been doubting what I'd complimented them for. So I think when people present confidently outwardly, and I would imagine there is a drive to do that. When you feel like you're an imposter, the last thing you want is to undermine other people's confidence in you. So you might present externally as quite confident, but that doesn't necessarily reflect what's going on the inside.
Totally. Yeah. And I would relate that to the swan. So the swan, you see the graceful gliding body on top of the water, but actually underneath you see the legs furiously flapping away. And that's certainly me as well, Jackie. Like, I present as really confident, and people tell me all the time that I'm really confident, but that's how you present to the world. It's not necessarily what's going on the inside. But I think it, like you said, really good point. It reinforces other people's confidence in you if you can present in a confident way. And I think as a leader, you need to be able to present that confidence even if you don't feel it. I think it takes time maybe internally for that. I love what you were saying with the identity gap to catch up with where you're actually currently feeling.
we've talked a lot around some of these symptoms and some of these different ways that it can show up. So share with us then, if you would, the imposter identities that you identified through your research, because I know this is going to really strike a chord for our listeners.
Yeah. So I have identified 5 different identities. I'm calling them the imposter identities. So number 1 is the overachiever. And for me, I think, just what it says on the tin. This is someone who's always achieving. They're always looking for the next thing. They want everything to be perfect as well. They maybe don't understand if other people aren't as ambitious as they are. They try and place their ambitions on other people. They maybe place their perfectionism on other people as well, become a little bit of a micromanager if things aren't going according to plan. I know I certainly relate to this, and I have been called an overachiever by other people as well. So if you've ever been called an overachiever, this could be one of the reasons why. The second one then is a people pleaser. And again, just what it says on the tin, you're putting other people's needs ahead of your own. And I think oftentimes we don't realize that we're doing this because it's probably been a habit or a behavior that we've had since we were kids. You want to keep everyone else happy, so you put your own needs and preferences last. I was listening to something the other day, actually, and in it they talked about, what was she saying? She was saying, someone said to her, do you want to go for lunch? How about sushi? And she hates sushi, but she said, yes, let's go for sushi, because she wanted to keep the other person happy. And I think we have this inner fear that we will be rejected, that we're going to not be part of the tribe if we make other people unhappy, or if we annoy other people by sharing what we want or need ourselves. So it becomes such an ingrained habit. But this is something that you're basically putting other people's happiness, other people's needs ahead of your own. The third one then is the procrastinator. So this is someone who puts off decisions or tasks or projects until the last minute, or puts them on the long finger that they never actually get to do them at all. So if you imagine this from the perspective that, like, I want to get this thing done, but I've left everything till the last minute. And if I wake up tomorrow and I have to deliver the project, there's a couple of scenarios. There is scenario 1 where the project is a real success, and I put that success down to luck, not down to talent. And I think, oh, wow, I succeeded because I just got really lucky. I was lucky with whatever happened, the result or whatever it was. Same with exams, now that I'm thinking of it. If you don't study for an exam, or if you cram at the last minute and then you do really well, oh, that was just luck, it wasn't talent. And then the second scenario is if things go horribly wrong and you think they went horribly wrong because I'm a total fraud and I shouldn't be doing this. But the reason that it went wrong is because you left it all to the last minute and you didn't put in the effort that was required in order for it to succeed. But you can see the thinking behind this, that on the one hand, we're saying it was luck. And on the other hand, we're saying I'm a total fraud and I shouldn't be doing this. Number 4 then is the success fearer. This is someone who is afraid of progressing. They're keeping themselves small in a role that maybe isn't tapping into their full skills, but they're doing this because they think success is going to bring something that's dangerous. So it's going to mean that they have to work more. It's going to mean that they're going to be in the spotlight more, that they're going to have more eyes on them. And in having more eyes on them, they need to live up to the expectations that they've currently set. So they go up to that next level. It's a whole new set of expectations, and they may then find themselves being judged, or they may fear being exposed as a fraud that they believe they are. So instead of going for roles, they play small, they stay where they are, and they're so afraid of going to that next level. So whether that is a fear of more work and less work-life balance, whether it is the visibility, that they're going to increase visibility as they progress through the ranks, there's something that's holding them back from wanting to be more visible, essentially. And then number 5 is the comparer. And this is someone who compares themselves to everyone else. No matter how successful you are, you look at other people and you can see, compared to that person, I'm not as good. Or what you might find yourself doing is, instead of celebrating in other people's successes, that you feel resentful towards them. So there's a lot of things going on for this person, that you're not necessarily happy for their success, that you're comparing. And a couple of different scenarios can come up in this. So either you become hyper competitive and you're competing with everyone and you're in it to win it, or you don't even try because you're like, compared to other people, I'm nothing, I'm nobody, and I'm not even going to bother trying. So they're the 5 different types, and a little bit of an insight into the thinking behind what goes on for them.
Do you know what? That when you're talking through those personas, I suppose there's probably, like, I was just thinking back through my career, it's almost like at different points in my career, I could say, do you know what? I've definitely fitted into that persona or that identity.
Yeah, no, for me too. I definitely can relate to all of these, and people have shared with me as well. They're like, what if you're all 5 of these different identities? What happens then? What can I do? This is from some research that I did. It was during the pandemic. So I'm like, the pandemic was only 1 or 2 years ago. This research was done about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. What I would like to do is revisit that research and maybe drill in a little bit more and trying to understand, is there a common thread among them? Is there a way that we can more clearly define so that you are either one or the other? Or maybe it's just a case of at different degrees, you experience these different types and you are, or these different identities, and you are more likely to be one, but actually you can exhibit all of these different types of behaviors. And maybe it's more about the behaviors and different types of behaviors that come up at different times in our careers, rather than I am one definite identity, but actually these behaviors show up in different ways in different times, because I certainly can relate to all of those. I don't know about you, Jackie, as well.
It's interesting as I was listening to them, because I would say I've been pretty fortunate. I've definitely experienced self-doubt.
Yeah.
But when I talk to clients about imposter syndrome, we often distinguish between confidence and self-belief. And we've talked about that on the podcast before. And I would say that on the whole, I've been somebody where my confidence might be up and down, depending on the context and the situation. But like you were saying about my experience when I was promoted, actually, those things were new to me. So I was relatively easily able to rationalize why I felt like a fish out of water in the situations that I did. And listening to those different identities, I think the one that probably stood out more for me was the overachiever and that drive for results, for evidence of my ability to achieve.
Yeah.
And for me, that didn't show up in micromanaging people. It didn't show up necessarily in that kind of way, but definitely related. It's the first time I've heard it, to that frustration when other people are not as ambitious or as pacey as you.
Yeah.
And that was in the early part of my career. I just didn't get it. Why are other people not prepared to do the things I'm prepared to do? Why are other people not so invested in achieving results in the way that I am?
Yeah.
So I would say that it wasn't so much the kind of micromanaging and that side of it, but very definitely I felt frustrated. And I think I lacked the maturity and the experience at that stage of my career to really consider, and lack the emotional intelligence as well, to have the empathy for other people's circumstances, other people's situations, and how that might play out. So yeah, definitely there's elements of that played in. And I think the other one that really stood out and I found really interesting was the comparer. And I would say I see this more so with clients rather than necessarily something that I felt. But because I always found it quite inspiring to be around people that I could consider role models. And I've worked in and around some incredible founders who've built amazing businesses, but they've always also been flawed. There's also been things that they're not that great at. And I think it's given me a sense of, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be amazing at everything in order to be successful. But what I've noticed with clients is this tendency that there's a tipping point of almost, it's not comfortable to compare yourself unfavorably to people who you perceive as better or more successful, but where that can show up for people and they don't necessarily see it as unhelpful is the other way of comparing.
Yeah, comparing favorably. Yes. Yeah. I forgot to mention that. And it's interesting, Jackie, what you said about the tipping point, because I did read something recently from someone he was saying how people are really supportive to a certain point, and then you become too successful. And then they start to try and tear you down. And for different people, that might mean at different levels, and it might be triggering for them in some way. But I just thought it was so interesting, the fact that like people who really support you at the start, and then you become quote unquote too successful, that they then start wanting to tear you down.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. And that's definitely something that I feel happened to me. And it's a funny place to be in, because all of a sudden those people that you've leaned towards for that support, all of a sudden they're no longer supporters. And it's a hard thing to deal with, because you go, okay. And then it's almost like you've got to go out and get this new group of people that are then going to help you with the next chapter and the next stage. But it is one of those situations where you go, oh, what do I do now? And I suppose if I go back to that time and then I was listening to this podcast and I go, oh my goodness, yeah, I'm either going to be ready for that to happen, or the place I'm in right now, and this is completely normal and natural and all the rest of it. Because I think sometimes when you're going through that, and especially if you are feeling that imposter creeping in, everything just seems a whole lot worse, or maybe it's not as achievable sometimes.
Yeah, this is it, I think. Yeah. And to me, I think they have this saying, don't they, that you are the sum of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. And I think if you have a career, we're not going into networking today, but it's so important to have that network around you and think about the people you are surrounding yourself with. And I think as we are talking about now, especially in terms of comparison, surrounding yourself with the right people who can support you. So someone who can, like Jackie said, be an inspiration, but then someone who can challenge you a little bit as well, who can call you out on your BS, who can be a listening ear. There's all of these different people that you need to have in your network to support you. And again, going back to what Pam said, those people might change from different levels, or you just outgrow people, your friends for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. So they could be your seasonal friends, and now you're on to a new season. And so you need a new support group, essentially.
It's so fascinating considering all of these different things that spring up just from that term of imposter syndrome, and how many different ways it can show up in terms of how people feel, in the way that they experience it, and then the behaviors that they may display as a consequence of that. If listeners are hearing those personas and doing exactly what we did, and almost mentally checking off, what do I relate to? What sounds like me? What is it that I'm experiencing? Does their kind of first steps to try and resolve imposter syndrome depend on which of those personas they're experiencing, or are there some practical first steps that are consistent regardless of how it shows up for them?
Yeah. So I always talk about my ABC methodology. I have an assessment that people can take, and I've put blood, sweat and tears into a free PDF based on whichever identity you come out as, so that you will get very specific steps that you can take. But from a more generic perspective, it's is all about acknowledge. So you need to acknowledge that this is imposter syndrome. So, and again, going back to your experience, Jackie, if you're saying that I started in this new role and maybe it wasn't imposter syndrome, maybe I don't have to have all the answers because I'm still new to this role. You're acknowledging that fact. But for someone else, maybe the experience is quite different, that they're acknowledging how they're showing up, how they're behaving, what their beliefs are about themselves. For me, it's really about recognizing, first of all, that it is imposter syndrome that you're experiencing. Then B is all about belief and how you can build up that belief in yourself. And sometimes we can't do that for ourselves. We need to get support from other people to be able to build up that belief that we have in ourselves. And there are some really great coaching tools that you can use as well. If you list out all of the skills or the achievements you have and how did you actually achieve what you have achieved. And sometimes people find it really hard to even name their achievements. Getting the help of other people. What do you think I've achieved in my career? Whether it's in your personal life, whether it's in your work life as well. The C then is courageous action. It's one thing talking about it and one thing knowing what it is that you need to do, but it's a whole other thing to take action. And oftentimes I think we believe that we need to feel confident before we take action. We need to convince ourselves, we need to feel like I can definitely do this, but that's the wrong way around. You need to start taking action first. You need to identify what is that one small thing that I can do today to get the support that I need. And the more action you take, the more your confidence is going to build over time. And the more success you have in taking those steps, the more your confidence is going to be able to take another step. The other thing to bear in mind with this is sometimes, I used to call them failures, but now I call them setbacks. Sometimes we have a setback on that journey, and it's about taking the learning from that. What can I learn from this experience? What might I do differently the next time? So a procrastinator might be like, okay, so the learning here was I need to maybe schedule in some time in advance of when the exam is or when the project is due to actually work on it. What can you learn from the experiences that you have? And then recently I've started talking about my bonus letter, which is D. And that's all about, I feel like an imposter, do it anyway. I feel like I'm not confident enough to speak up in this meeting, do it anyway. I feel like I am not a good leader. Okay, continue to lead anyway. Really, all of these things that try and hold us back, all of these fears that we have, what is the risk of not taking the action that you want to take? Instead of listening to all of the fears, what will people think? Because that's a huge one. What will people think? And what worse, what will people think if I fail? If I tell people I'm going to do something and then I fail miserably in front of them? I can share a link to the imposter identity assessment. If people want to take the assessment, it's free to take. Understand a little bit more about the specific identity that you relate most to, and then the steps that you can take specific to that identity as well. I'll be happy to share that.
Amazing. And we'll include all of those links in the show notes as well, so people can access them.
Yeah, I think that's going to be so valuable for people to be able to really see that. But I also really love the simplicity of that ABCD. And as you were describing it, I was thinking of a new client that I've started working with recently. You've just described pretty much the tone of a coaching conversation that we had, where they realized that the thing that was stopping them from speaking up was the worry of the consequences of what if I speak up and that isn't what people want to hear, and what might they think of me, and all of those fears. But they hadn't considered, and that was the question that I posed, what if the biggest risk is not speaking up? How do you want to show up? How do you want other people to perceive you? And is the behavior of playing small and keeping quiet feeding into that identity that you want to create, or is it going against it? And I think very often that whole do it anyway feels incredibly scary. Yeah. But when you break it down, the bigger risk is often not doing the thing.
Yeah. Especially, as you say, speaking up, because I think the perception of someone who's just in a meeting and they don't say anything, it's like, well, why are they in the meeting if they're not contributing anything?
Yeah. And I've seen the other side with other clients where I've seen people being told you should speak up more in meetings. So I think particularly as you get to a more senior level, you've got this weird thing of, I don't feel like I belong in this room, and I don't feel like I've got enough to contribute, or what I'm going to say is meaningful enough or important enough for people to listen to. So I'll stay quiet. But the judgment of somebody, like you say, who shows up to meetings and just quietly sits and doesn't contribute and doesn't participate is far greater than somebody who says something that people might disagree with, because at least that can spark discussion. At least that can...
Exactly. Yeah. There are no wrong questions. There are no stupid questions, and there are no wrong answers.
Aoife, you've been amazing as a guest, as we knew that you would be. And like we said at the start, we could very easily have continued going for hours with this. Where can people connect with you? So before you say, I'm going to say to people, go and listen to your podcast, because when we started this podcast, yours was one of the ones that I listened to for research, because we wanted to know what kind of field we want. And the conversations absolutely blew my mind. It's become one of my favorite podcasts. So definitely go and listen to Happier at Work. But where else can people...
Thank you so much, Jackie. Yeah, the two places I always recommend, especially if I'm on another podcast, definitely go and check out Happier at Work. Search for it wherever you're listening to your podcast. You'll find it. There are At time of this recording, there are over 225 episodes, so a lot to choose from. But pick ones that resonate with you, have a listen, let me know what you think. The second best place really is LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I love it as a platform, but I will spell my name for you because people will not know how to spell my name. I've lived all over the world and yeah, it's a tricky one. So it's Aoife and my surname is O'Brien. So that's very standard. O''Brien.
Brilliant. And we will, again, put those links in the show notes so that if people are driving or doing something else and don't have a pen and paper to spell your name, then you can just click on the link in the show notes and you'll be able to connect with Aoife and also get directly to the Happier at Work podcast. Aoife, thank you so much for joining us and for all that you've shared. I think it's definitely going to be an episode that people will want to listen to more than once to really take in some of what you've been describing and talking about. And yeah, cannot wait to catch up with you in the future as you build and deepen that research. It's such an important topic.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you as ever for listening. We will be back next week with another episode. So if there are any topics that you want us to cover in future episodes, if you want us to find more incredible experts like Aoife, then just let us know. And if it's not a topic that we have the expertise in, then as you can hear from this episode, we have an amazing network of brilliant people that we can bring in to describe. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you again next time.
Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.